Berry Gordy built the most powerful hit machine in music history. 12 number ones, a house band that played on more hits than the Beatles, songwriters who could turn a melody into a $1 million record before lunch. But here is what Gordy never counted on. His own musicians were sneaking out the back door. His own songwriters were building rival labels. And a string of scrappy, hungry operations, some just blocks away, were watching Hitsville, USA, like a blueprint. Your love lifted me high. Today, we count down 10 one-hit wonders whose songs proved you could take Motown's formula, bottle it, and sell it right back to America without Berry Gordy getting a cent. Real stories, verified facts. Let's go. Number 10, San Remo, Golden Strings. Hungry for Love, 1965. Here's how brazen it got. Ed Wingate owned a small Detroit label called Ric-tic Records, operating just miles from Hitsville. He wanted his records to sound like Motown, so he did the obvious thing. He hired Motown's own musicians. The San Remo Golden Strings were not a real band. They were a rotating crew of session players, Detroit Symphony Orchestra musicians mixed with moonlighting members of Motown's legendary Funk Brothers. James Jamerson, the greatest bass player in soul music history, played on Hungry for Love. The same Jamerson under contract to Berry Gordy. The same Jamerson Gordy had already fined for moonlighting. That didn't stop anyone. The record was arranged by Gil Askey, who also worked for Motown. It was recorded at Golden World Studios, a facility Wingate built specifically to compete with Hitsville. The studio was so impressive that Gordy eventually bought it and turned it into Motown Studio B. Hungry for Love hit number 27 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1965. That bass line you hear, that groove, that is the Motown sound, played by Motown musicians on a rival label. Wingate then attended the Motown Christmas party and handed every fined funk brother double their fine in cash on the spot, in front of everyone. Number 9, Edwin Starr, Agent 00 Soul, 1965. Before Edwin Starr screamed, "War, what is it good for?" he was a 23-year-old Army veteran from Cleveland with a James Bond obsession and a voice that could shake walls. A Detroit DJ named LeBaron Taylor introduced him to Ed Wingate at ric-tic Records. Starr had written a spy-themed song timed perfectly to ride the Thunderball wave sweeping America in 1965. He called it Agent 00 Soul. Wingate signed him. They booked a session. The band that showed up, Motown's Funk Brothers, again. Bob Babbitt played bass in his very first recorded session as a funk brother. The same musicians Gordy had already fined showed up and did it anyway. The record hit number 8 on the R&B chart and number 21 on the Hot 100. It was only the 4th single ric-tic had ever released. Gordy fined his musicians again. Then instead of fighting it, he simply bought ric-tic Records outright. Edwin Starr found out he was a Motown artist while overseas on tour. One of the Temptations told him. He called it a shock to the system. His biggest hit, War, came later at Motown. But the voice that forced Gordy to act debuted on a rival label, powered by musicians Gordy thought he owned.
Listen, 90% of you watching right now aren't subscribed yet. If these stories are blowing your mind, imagine what you're missing. Hit subscribe, turn on that bell, and join the 200,000 R&B fans who never miss a Groove Lens upload.
Number 8. The Capitals. Cool Jerk, 1966. The summer of 1966. The Temptations at number 1, the Supremes all over radio, and a Detroit trio called the Capitals were about to crash the party, using the exact same musicians without permission. The Capitals formed in 1962. All 3 members played instruments: Samuel George on drums and lead vocals, Don Storball on guitar, Richard Mitchell on keys. Storball wrote a song about a street dance sweeping Detroit clubs. The Pimp Jerk, they called it. He renamed it Cool Jerk, knowing radio would ban the original. They took it to Karen Records, a tiny label run by an Ann Arbor DJ who had been watching Berry Gordy and quietly building his own operation. They recorded at Golden World Studios on March 14, 1966. The musicians, the Funk Brothers, Eddie Willis on guitar, Johnny Griffith on piano, Bob Babbitt on bass, all under Motown contract, all moonlighting for extra cash. The horn players scheduled for the session, they chickened out, too scared of Gordy to show. The raw, hornless groove became the hit sound by accident. Cool Jerk hit number 7 on the Hot 100 and number 2 on the R&B chart. ATCO distributed it nationally. Reach Gordy couldn't block. The Go-Go's covered it in 1982. One DJ's label, Motown's musicians, and a summer anthem that outlasted everything. Number 7, The Parliaments. I Wanna Testify, 1967. George Clinton was living 2 lives at once. By day, he was a staff songwriter inside Motown, learning exactly how the machine worked. By night, he was running his own vocal group, The Parliaments, out of a New Jersey barbershop, and desperately trying to get them a hit. Motown passed on The Parliaments, so when Detroit-based Reveille Records offered a deal in 1966, Clinton jumped. He was the only Parliament who made it to Detroit for the session. The rest were in New Jersey. Clinton sang the lead himself, surrounded by local session musicians schooled in the same Motown-adjacent sound he had spent years studying. I Wanna Testify hit number 3 on the R&B chart and number 20 on the pop chart in 1967. Then Reveille went bankrupt. The label collapse locked the Parliament's name in litigation. Clinton lost the rights to his own group's name, so he pushed his backing band forward as a separate act, called them Funkadelic, and rebuilt from scratch. Parliament Funkadelic went on to chart over 40 R&B hits, 6 number 1s, and 3 platinum albums, all of it starting from one shot a struggling rival label gave him, a shot Motown had already refused. Number 6, Freda Payne, Band of Gold, 1970. By 1970, Dozier Holland were at war with Motown. They had written 12 #1 singles for Berry Gordy, 12, and received no profit sharing. When they demanded their cut, Gordy refused. So they left, sued, and launched their own label, Invictus Records. They immediately called Motown's Funk Brothers. Same musicians, same session singers, same infrastructure, just a different address. They signed Detroit singer Freda Payne and handed her a song they had written under the fake name Edwin, because the Motown lawsuit blocked them from putting their real names on record credits. Payne didn't want to record it. She thought it was written for a teenager. She was nearly 30. Her co-producer told her, "You don't have to like it, just sing it." She sang it. Band of Gold hit #3 on the Billboard Hot 100. In the UK, it went to #1 for 6 consecutive weeks. The bass was played by Bob Babbitt, a funk brother. The background singers included future members of Tony Orlando and Dawn, and Freda Payne's own sister, who would later join the Supremes. Motown had fired its best weapons. Those weapons walked across the street and immediately made another #1. Number 5, Chairman of the Board, Give Me Just a Little More Time, 1970. Dozier Holland didn't just sign Freda Payne when they left Motown. They built an entirely new machine. They recruited General Johnson, formerly of a group called The Showmen, and assembled a 4-man vocal group around him. They named them the Chairman of the Board. Lamont Dozier explained, "We called them that because of their extraordinary talents. They each played instruments, sang, and wrote songs. This was designed to do exactly what the Four Tops had done for Motown. A powerful lead voice, tight harmonies, big production." The debut single, Give Me Just a Little More Time, dropped in January 1970. The band, the Funk Brothers, Dennis Coffey on guitar, Bob Babbitt on bass, Johnny Griffith on keys, Jack Ashford on percussion. Every one of them Motown's own musicians. It hit #3 on the Billboard Hot 100 and #8 on the R&B chart. Gold record. Over 1 million copies sold. In September 1970, British music magazine NME reported that Invictus had the UK's top 2 singles simultaneously. Band of Gold at #1, Give Me Just a Little More Time right behind it. A label that hadn't existed 2 years earlier was outselling Motown in Britain because it was built by the same 3 men, using the same musicians who built Motown in the first place. Number 4, The Honeycomb Want Ads, 1971. Label, Hot Wax Records. Dozier Holland ran 2 labels after leaving Motown. Invictus handled the prestige acts. Hot Wax Records was where things got quietly explosive. The Honeycomb were a Los Angeles trio: Carolyn Willis, Shelley Clark, and Edna Wright. Session singers, backup vocalists. Edna Wright was the sister of Darlene Love. They had voices, style, and chemistry. HDH signed them to Hot Wax in 1969. For 2 years, singles moved but didn't explode. Then General Johnson, of the chairman of the board, handed them a song he had written about a woman placing a classified ad for a better man after her current one let her down. Sharp, funny, modern, completely irresistible. The Funk Brothers played the track. The production was built on the same rhythmic DNA HDH had perfected at Motown. The sound was unmistakably from that world. Want Ads hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Stayed there 2 weeks, #1 on the R&B chart, over 1 million copies sold. The Honeycomb had the biggest hit in the entire Invictus and Hot Wax catalog. Bigger than Freda Payne. Bigger than the chairman of the board. 3 women on a label Motown's own architects built outsold every other soul act in America. #3, Jackie Wilson, Your Love Keeps Lifting Me Higher and Higher, 1967. This one is personal. Jackie Wilson was not just connected to Motown, he was the reason Motown existed. In the late 1950s, Berry Gordy was a struggling songwriter who got his first break when Wilson recorded his songs, including ric-tic in 1957. Wilson was the spark that lit Gordy's career, and Gordy repaid that by building Motown without him. Wilson stayed at Brunswick Records his entire life, a Chicago label with none of Motown's machine, none of its songwriters, a fraction of its promotional power. And yet in 1967, he released one of the greatest soul records ever made, Higher and Higher. The musicians on that session, the Funk Brothers, had migrated over to play it, the same players who gave Motown its pulse, showing up for the man Berry Gordy had left behind. The record hit #6 on the Hot 100, #1 on the R&B chart, one of the most covered songs in pop history. Wilson never got his full financial due. He suffered a massive heart attack on stage in 1975, fell into a coma, and spent his last 9 years in a care facility. He died in 1984. His gravestone reads, "No More Lonely Teardrops," a Motown song Berry Gordy wrote. The Funk Brothers gave Wilson his finest moment. Brunswick gave him everything except what he deserved. #2, The Holidays, I'll Love You Forever, 1966. You may not know that name, but you know where the lead singer ended up? Richard Street became a member of the Temptations. In 1966, he was singing at Golden World Records, Ed Wingate's Detroit label built in direct competition with Motown. And bright lights don't shadow. The Holidays were a vocal group on the roster. Street sang lead. Edwin Starr, yes, the same Edwin Starr from ric-tic, wrote and also sang on the track. It hit #12 on the Billboard R&B chart. Golden World was so effective at replicating the Motown sound that Gordy had one option left. He bought the label outright in 1966, acquired the masters, the artists, the musicians, the whole operation. Richard Street came with the deal. When the Temptations needed a replacement for Paul Williams in 1971, they chose the man who had been singing Motown-style soul on a rival label for years. My little baby. Street stayed with the Temptations until 1993, recording Papa Was a Rolling Stone and Masterpiece along the way. Forever and ever. The man who competed with Motown became one of its most enduring voices. Gordy didn't beat the competition, he absorbed it, and the talent he absorbed outlasted everyone. Number 1, Clarence Carter. Patches, I'm Depending on You, 1970. The greatest trick the rival label Formula ever pulled was giving away a number 1 hit. I was born and raised in Alabama. General Johnson, lead singer of the chairman of the board, wrote a song from personal experience about a young boy in rural Alabama whose dying father passes the burden of the family onto his shoulders. Johnson wrote it about real life, the kind of working-class Southern struggle Motown rarely touched. H.D.H. recorded it with the chairman of the board for Invictus, but it was just a B-side. They didn't push it. So I told Mama I was going to quit school, but she said that. A blind blues singer named Clarence Carter heard it on the album. He took it to Fame Studios in Muscle Shoals, the South's answer to Detroit. Produced by Rick Hall, different rhythm section, grittier feel. Carter's voice wrapped around those lyrics with raw, unpolished authority. It went to number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100, number 2 on the R&B chart, number 2 in the UK. It won Clarence Carter and General Johnson the Grammy Award for Best Rhythm and Blues Song in 1971. Written by a rival label's artist, recorded at a Southern studio Motown would never have used, distributed by Atlantic, won the biggest award in R&B. Motown didn't write it. Motown didn't record it. Motown didn't win that Grammy. 3 rival operations did, together. That is the story of how Berry Gordy's formula left the building and never fully came back. Motown was the formula, but formulas don't stay locked up forever. The musicians needed more money, the songwriters needed fair pay, and every rival label watching from across Detroit knew exactly what they were looking at. Every record on this list sounds like Motown because it was made by Motown's own people. They just happened to be somewhere else when the tape rolled. Like this video, if you learned something, subscribe for more music history that goes deeper than the headlines. Drop a comment. Which of these records surprised you most? Thanks for watching.